Mais ou menos.
Bota o verde, o rosa e o azul. Mais fácil.
Passa aqui, tá?
Tá.
E
Eu vou botar aqui. Listo, está bien. Si esto está listo, está bien. Gracias.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the ICN Unilateral Conduct Workshop 2025, organized by the Administrative Council of Economic Defense, CADE, within the scope of the ICN Unilateral Conduct Working Group in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. This is the third and final day of the workshop. And this morning, our guests will engage in lively discussion during the special session on digital economy regulation. Before starting the workshop, please put your cell phones on vibrate or silent mode. Thank you for your attention. Please, let's welcome the speakers to the floor. Moderator, Ms. Camila Alves, Commissioner at CADE, Brazil, please. Please, Ms. Katrina Kraus, Chair of the 7th Decision Division at the Bundesrat mit Germany.
Alles gut? Ach, danke schön. Bitte. Danke schön.
And Mr. Alexandre Rebelo, Director of the Secretariat for Economic Monitoring of Brazil Ministry of Finance, please. Ms. Camila, please, the word is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Camila Pires Alves, Commissioner at CADE. I'd like to appreciate the fact that you all are here for this morning panel, even after last night's dinner and celebrations. Thank you so much. In this panel, we will discuss regulation in the digital economy. The regulation of digital platforms has become one of the major challenges for competition policy, as technological advancements have reshaped markets, creating new dynamics of economic power and demanding regulatory responses that balance innovation and the protection of competition. The panel will explore how different jurisdictions are addressing regulatory issues and highlight the various possibilities that emerge, as well as the trends and challenges that arise. Before we begin, I would like to thank Katerina and Alexandre for being our panelists in what I'm sure will be a very interesting conversation. So let me introduce them. Katerina Kraus joined the Bundesrat in 1999 and is now the head of the 7th Decision Division, which focuses on telecommunications, broadcast, engineering, and ADP. From 2010 to 2017, she served as head of the Special Unit for Combating Cartels within the legal department, which advises the decision divisions in fines proceedings, and from 1999 to 2010, she worked as a case handler and case manager in various sectorial divisions. She has written and lectured on antitrust law, cartel enforcement, and criminal procedural law. Alexandre Rebelo is a director at the Ministry of Finance's Secretariat of Economic Reforms. He holds a master's degree and a bachelor degree in law from the University of São Paulo Faculty of Law, where he is currently a PhD candidate. Alexandre has previously worked in a private sector with regulatory affairs and public policy related to financial services, payments, and technology. He has held previous positions as a government official at the state government of Maranhão and at São Paulo City Hall. Alexandre is also part of the Law and Public Policy Group at USP. So it's a privilege to sit alongside such esteemed colleagues on this panel, reflecting a rich diversity of perspectives and experiences. I'd like to share a few quick reflections. So first, a comparative analysis indicates that although reforms vary across countries, there is a convergence toward adopting and hybrid regulatory frameworks that integrate elements of traditional antitrust law with economic regulation. This convergence is particularly evident in a context of digital platform regulation. Different jurisdictions have implemented diverse approaches, yet they increasingly share common characteristics, specifically combining preventive measures with reactive mechanisms tailored to the unique dynamics of digital markets. For instance, the European Union introduced the Digital Markets Act, as we know, often cited as a benchmark for pro-competitive regulation in digital environments. Beyond Europe, however, various countries are also developing regulatory solutions with distinct objectives, instruments, and scopes. In Germany, as Katharina will explore, the reform of antitrust law appears to have taken a particularly innovative approach, enabling interventions in multi-sided and network markets. By designating companies based on their business models and imposing ex-ante obligations, these frameworks effectively bypasses the traditional processes of defining the market and identifying market power. Other countries also have interesting experience to share. The United Kingdom seems to have adopted a complementary stance to antitrust law with a highly tailored regulatory regime. Meanwhile, Japan appears to have focused its efforts on mobile ecosystems with predefined obligations and a more prescriptive regulatory framework compared to the others. In Brazil, Alexandre is here to tell us more about it. The Ministry of Finance recently proposed a new regulatory framework for digital platforms that exemplifies this hybrid approach. The different experiences show that despite the particularities of each system, there's a global movement towards more flexible regulatory models that are adapted to the dynamics of digital markets. So it's truly an honor to be part of this panel. To start, I'd like to invite Alexandre to begin with the presentation on the Ministry of Finance 2024 Digital Platforms Report. So Alexandre, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexandre. I'm a director at the Secretariat of Economic Reforms, which is a unit at the Ministry of Finance that's also part of the Brazilian system of competition defense. And we have the role of promoting competition advocacy. So that's our role here in the Brazilian competition defense system. And so first and foremost, I'd like to thank Kaji for the invitation to be a part of this panel. And on behalf of Commissioner Camila, I'd like to express my gratitude for Kaji for being here. And I'd also like to highlight the excellent dialogue that we have been having over the course of the last years and especially during the last semester. So we have been talking a lot to try to find the right solutions for complex challenges that we are facing when it comes to designing the adequate solutions for the digital economy. And I think that Commissioner Camila mentioned this hybrid approach, so this approach between antitrust and economic regulation in a more traditional sense. And I think we have a very a great level of convergence here when it comes to what Brazil should be doing to tackle those very specific challenges of digital platforms when it comes to competition, right? So in that regard, we launched a public consultation in January 2023, and as a result, so by doing that, we intended to analyze those economic and competition aspects regarding digital platforms, and also to provide subsidies, you know, for this debate going on that's been going on for a few years already. So we wanted to subsidize proposals to see how we could better deal with those challenges in a more efficient way. And so what we did is we published a report in October of last year that's based on theoretical analysis, a review on the great submissions, on the great contributions that we had through the public consultation. We also did a benchmark regarding 10 jurisdictions, and I think Germany was a very important case. So I think it's great also to be here with you, Katarina, and also to learn a bit more about the German experience and how this has been implemented, Section 19A. And we also conducted an economic analysis regarding digital services in Brazil in order to highlight a few key aspects of Brazilian digital ecosystems and how digital services are organized in the country. And so I think that a starting point is that we see that there's an unprecedented growth in the market value of technological platforms, of companies that own technological platforms. And we see that associated to a business model of growing relevance to the global economy, and I think not only to the digital economy, but also to a growing digitalization of the economy as a whole, so to financial services, to transportation services, to advertising. So these productivity gains that are associated with this unprecedented growth, they also, our view is that we need to make sure that this, we can share this in the Brazilian economy so that this does not lead to concentration, rather we can use this power to foster digital entrepreneurship, to foster small and medium businesses in Brazil, because that's the backbone also of our economy, the digital enterprise. People working in the digital economies, people selling their products in marketplaces, and also Brazilian companies, but also foreign companies that want to come to Brazil and have a good environment for competition in digital markets. And in a nutshell, what we are arguing here in this report is that we have a few shortcomings when it comes to traditional antitrust. So we are calling this a few points of attention. When we are dealing with strong network effects and elevated degrees of complexities, and so with those winner-takes-all scenarios, because we see players with overlapping functions. So we see players that are at the same time providers, users, partners, competitors, and that brings us to a level of complexity that sometimes is challenging to deal with or to identify market power by looking at a single relevant market. So those definitions and these practices, we see a limitation when it comes to being able to grasp and to deal with those new expressions of market power that are also associated with zero pricing and with a very intensive use of a collection, processing, and sophisticated use of algorithms to process data and to provide business insights. And this has an impact on the economy as a whole. So what we see is that the probability of effectiveness, given the limitation of designing remedies and the time it takes to conclude or to walk through some investigations, maybe just takes too long. It takes too long, and then markets are then, we already had the tipping effect, and then we have negative consequences for the economy as a whole. And so what we did here for the case of Brazil, and I think that in order to highlight that and in our economy, was to conduct a study and to map the ecosystems of digital platforms networks in Brazil. So what we did, I think, was we didn't try to focus on single services, rather on the connection between those services and how that those are proxies to identify very strong network effects and complex ecosystems in which we see exactly that kind of expression of market power. And what we saw is that here, so we have this, we mapped the 20 most relevant digital services in Brazil. And what we identified was a degree of connection between those different services. So we see different ranges of combination between them. And what we can identify is that on the right-hand side here, so when we look at mobile operational system, browser, messaging, search, social networks, and a few other ones, we see there are few players here, but nonetheless they have a very high degree of connection with other digital services. So those people providing, the companies providing these services are also providing other services, and we see a level of concentration and of interconnectedness. And so on the left-hand side, we see also few players, but a smaller degree of complexity, because those are services that right now are less connected. And on the middle, for instance, marketplace and payments, we see a good amount of players and also many connections. And a part of mapping the interconnectedness between digital services, we also mapped those ecosystems based on economic groups and the services provided by them. And what we see is that we have this interesting picture of the Brazilian digital economy topology. So we have this scenario in which we have a few players with multiple overlapping segments. So those are the players that are providing the majority of digital services in Brazil, and they have multiple points of contact with the digital economy as a whole. So what we see here is that in the middle here, the digital economy as a whole, tourism, fintechs, delivery apps, passenger transport, social network games, they are all connected to this centrality. So we see that this, it's not a conclusion yet. This still needs to, this will still depend on a specific case assessment. But we see here, those are candidates to be considered what we are calling platforms of systemic relevance to digital markets in Brazil. So we see a few qualitative characteristics here that point us towards this aspect. And so we are also presenting in this report the diagnosis that this business model is fundamental for the Brazilian economy, right? However, we need to take a closer look to the competition aspects related to it. Otherwise, we'll incur in the risk of having not what we want, which is greater productivity in the economy, but rather the contrary. That we have those, in a few cases, monopolistic rents that are working the opposite way of what we want. So what we see today is that even though we do have in Brazil a very dynamic digital economy, especially in the context of Latin America, we have a thriving fintech business, a fintech segment, for instance. What we see is a mismatch between digital platform dynamics and the current mechanisms to promote competition in Brazil. And this conclusion was also based on evidence brought by a significant number of participants in our public consultation. So what we saw was players from the digital economy, such as banks, fintechs, app developers, dating app developers, music streaming app developers, marketplace app developers, People coming to us and say, okay, there's something wrong here. We need a better environment to develop our business. So we took that into account. And what we are proposing now is, I think we have two groups of propositions to strengthen our capabilities of promoting competition in the Brazilian digital economy. What we're calling here Group 1. So those are new measures that we are proposing, new regulatory instruments for CADE to cope with the challenges posed by systemically relevant platforms for digital markets, which are those large players that control complex ecosystems with very strong network effects, a great level of complexity, a great level of centrality, and that's where we have that's the shortcoming of the current antitrust mechanisms. That's what we are not being able to deal with today in a timely manner. So in those cases, we need to take preventive action aimed at increasing contestability and also reducing barriers to entry and amplifying freedom of choice for individual users, but especially for business users. So this is a concern for us at the Ministry of Finance. And I think that brings us here to what's, I think that's the novel approach we are proposing for Brazil. And I'm going to walk you through the details in the coming slide. And Group 2, which is aimed at digital platforms in general, we have a few recommendations that rely on a few adjustments, soft law interpretation of the current mechanisms that we have today at the Brazilian competition legislation, aimed at dealing with digital platforms in general, but with a smaller degree of complexity. So Group 1, what we are proposing here, and this needs legislation, and we are currently debating that, and I can talk a bit more about it during our panel, is to introduce two new powers for CADE. So first, CADE should be able to designate platforms that are systemically relevant for digital markets based on a list of qualitative criteria and respecting a certain threshold of turnover, so a safe harbor condition here, but based on a specific investigation, so that will be a decision of designating digital platforms. And second, after the designation, CADE should also be able to design specific and substantive obligations to those platforms. So we see, and what we have identified here are mostly four types of obligations, which would be procedural, transparency, prohibitions, and also dues, right? So actions that platforms should take in order to foster competition. And then we can also comment a bit more about the kinds and the use cases that we are thinking here for the digital economy and for the use of this new powers. And we also consider that a specialized unit within CADE should be responsible for implementing those new tools, but that nonetheless, CADE's tribunal should have the final say on both of those decisions. So those are two new procedures. So procedure number 1, designation. Procedure number 2, the imposition of substantive obligations on a case-by-case logic. So design for the specific challenges posed by each one of those very large, systemically relevant, designated platforms. This needs legislative action, and we are currently in an advanced stage of debate with the Brazilian presidency to decide how we are going to debate this with Congress. So we expect news in the coming weeks and months, but we are ready to take this to Congress. And this is one of the priorities for Minister Fernando Haddad in the legislative agenda of 2025. So that's where we stand when it comes to Group 1 and the adjustments to existing legislation. When it comes to Group 2, what we are proposing, what we have recommended here is that there should be this continuous improvement of the analytical framework used to identify and assess competition risks in the case of the digital economy as a whole. So when it comes to digital platforms that are not that relevant, or maybe even in cases that are not completely covered by the new designation and new imposition of specific obligations, that we think that new theories of harm should be used to cope with multi-sided markets and digital ecosystems, to assess the nature and magnitude of network effects when it comes to multiple digital services consumed by the same group, by the same community, for instance. The ability to multi-home, the role that data collection and data processing has in that regard. So I think that's one of the recommendations that we have that we think can already be done and used through the implementation of existing instruments. And also, I know that we are talking about conduct here, but I couldn't help myself to come with a few elements regarding structure. When it comes to pre-merger notification analysis, we also think that the collection of crucial information, such as number of users, types of services offered, data collected and processed, that those are also important, important points that should be considered during the analysis of merger review. And during the merger review, that in the case where you have a proxy of a huge amount of data, for instance, that a platform collects through the offering of a free service and how that relates to say, the digital ads value chain. So that should be considered during the review of case, and sometimes consider putting it under the ordinary procedure for review, right? So we think that there should be a good level of scrutiny here, considering those non-price aspects, those complexities that sometimes emerge from other ways of analyzing. And finally, we also think that in some cases, what we see is that we're dealing with complexities regarding the acquisition of startups, of artificial intelligence startups, of digital advertising startups that sometimes are nascent, sometimes have, they do not fall, they're not above the turnover threshold for pre-merger notification. So we think that in that regard, the current legislation can also be used for a greater scrutiny in that regard. So even though it does not fall above the notification threshold, we think that we can have a relevant use here of the Article 88, Paragraph 7. So I think that I wanted to share those, that's the core of our message. I think that those are the key elements I wanted to share with you to start our debate. And then we can talk a bit more about the specific use cases, what we think, which segments we think could be better impact, and the potential benefits for the Brazilian economy. And if you want to have the complete version of the report in English, you can just scan this QR code, and it's also available at the Ministry of Finance website. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexandre, for this insightful presentation. The Ministry of Finance 2024 report brings valuable contributions on the ongoing debate and how to regulate digital markets effectively. The proposal granting CADE the power to designate systematically relevant platforms and define tailored rules for them marks a significant shift towards a more proactive and flexible regulatory approach. So I believe that the report from the Ministry of Finance does an outstanding job of demonstrating the necessity for CADE to adopt this flexible approach, if it's the case of CADE doing that. The ability to address competitive concerns in a more target and dynamic way could help overcome some of the limitations of traditional antitrust enforcement in digital markets. So with that in mind, I'd like to open the floor to our next speaker, Katarina, who will further explore these regulatory challenges by discussing the structure and approach of Section 19A, as well as providing an overview of 19A cases. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's really an honor for me to be here on this panel and to be allowed to talk about a little bit about the German perspective here. It's very interesting developments that happen here in Brazil, and I think it's very insightful to learn about how you're going to then implement it also in the future. First, I would like to make a disclaimer again that I'm speaking here only in my personal capacity. And also, well, like you've already mentioned, there's been a broad discussion worldwide, I think, concerning the challenges for competition enforcement in digital markets. And like Brazil, also Germany has been part of it and has taken an active part here. And I think there's been, in a lot of countries, there's been a consensus that maybe traditional competition tools are maybe not enough to tackle the special issues that arise here in the digital economy. But maybe our cases take too long, our interventions come too late. And this is especially, of course, why in Europe we have now the Digital Markets Act, which also applies, of course, to Germany. And but it is, since it is only enforced by the European Commission, I'm not going to go into more detail of the Digital Markets Act, but going to talk more about the special German perspective. And the law we've the tools that we have introduced, which complement the Digital Markets Act. As I said, we've taken an active part in that discussion, and in light of that, with that background, we had already made some amendments to our competition law, the legislator, already in 2017, which were helpful, of course, especially some helpful clarifications, setting out market power factors, for example, for our platforms. But still, we soon also realized that that probably would not be enough, that we are still, cases take too long, and especially traditional approaches with where you have to do each for every market, a market definition, proof dominance of the affected companies. Takes too long, so this is why we introduced then in 2021 another amendment of our law and introduced a new tool, Section 19A of the German Competition Act, addressing abusive behavior of undertakings of paramount significance for competition across markets. And in the following, first, I would like to explain a bit the goal and structure of Section 19A, and then give as an example of its application the designation decision concerning Google. The amendment of our law in 2021 was in particular meant to address large digital companies that provide digital ecosystems. It's supposed to address undertakings that hold a position of economic power that allows for scope of action across markets, that is not sufficiently controlled by competition. And among other factors, such undertakings usually benefit from outstanding access of data, to data and to other resources, like a large user base, know-how, technology, own computing capacities, or financial resources that can be deployed in a variety of different areas, some of them are so-called shareable inputs. The addressees are active on various platform markets that are often interconnected, and oftentimes also these addressees are dominant on one or more markets. Such undertakings are regularly well equipped to fend off competition from other providers, and expansion into a new service and into new markets is also easier for such undertakings usually. For example, because they themselves organize the markets, their access to conditions, and thus the competitive opportunities within their ecosystem, or because high switching costs for users may exist due to ecosystem characteristics. So the goal of the amendment to the German competition law, the new section 19a, is to allow the Bundeskartellamt to intervene earlier and more effectively against potential anti-competitive practices of large digital companies. And in the following, this is why the provision has a certain structure, and I would like to explain this structure in the following. The first step when applying this law is the designation of a company, so we designate certain companies which are significantly, first of all, such companies have to be significantly active on platform markets, and then they have to have paramount significance across markets. So then the law states a couple of, I think 5 criteria, which are named in the provision, which you have to consider when considering whether a company has paramount significance across markets. Significant. Now I'm just stuck here. It's so complicated, this. Okay. So the criteria that are named in the provision, you can see them here. The company has to be, or does not have to be, you have to consider whether the company has an ecosystem with vertical or other interrelations, whether the company has access to data with relevance for competition and or other resources. You have to consider the relevance of its activities for third-party access to markets and its related influence on the business activities of third parties. And finally, you can also consider whether the company is dominant on one or two more markets. And I think that the criteria capture quite well digital ecosystems and platforms with power across markets, which have potential to harm competition. Designation decision is valid for 5 years, but of course can be taken again. And in the second step, if we have designated a company, we have then, or Section 19a provides for several prohibition options, which allow enforcement of these prohibitions during the entire duration of the designation of the company. Section 19a, the prohibition options of Section 19a concern, for example, self-preferencing and the envelopment and leveraging strategies, practices related to processing of data, the lack of interoperability or data portability, and finally, disproportionate terms and conditions. The prohibition options combine specific examples of behavior with more general principles. broader phrasing and approach allows to take into account economic and technical developments that you have not foreseen maybe in detail when introducing the law. So this means that we can contribute with our enforcement action faster and intervene faster, and we do not have to wait for the legislator to adopt a provision. No, sorry, it's too early. No. However, this is why the provisions are not self-executing and have to be activated by the Bundeskartellamt. We have to explicitly prohibit a certain anti-competitive behavior, like in traditional cases. The prohibition options are not applicable insofar as the conduct is objectively justified. However, the burden of proof is with the company. The justification for the shift of the burden of proof, it is because it is often hard from the outside to understand and assess correctly all the relevant factors, especially concerning fast developing and complex digital economy. So the designated company has much better information on all the relevant aspects and can avoid over-enforcement by providing us with relevant information. This shift of the burden of proof is an important aspect also with respect to acceleration and facilitation of interventions by the authority. Now, next slide. Yeah. Unlike in Brazil and the Bundeskartellamt, we have not introduced a special unit to enforce this new section, but we have taken the traditional approach that the different decision divisions are in charge of enforcing the law. But since it is a new law, there is of course room for interpretation. And this is why we introduced, and to make sure that there is a common approach within the different decision divisions of the Bundeskartellamt, we introduced a working group, established an internal working group early on, including members of all the case teams that apply Section 90A, with a primary focus of the development and refinement of a concept when applying the law, and conceptual exchange on the designation proceedings. Yeah, this is the slide showing what we have done so far in enforcing the law. So we have identified Google, Meta, Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft as companies with paramount significance across market. And we also initiated already several proceedings which may draw on these decisions based on Section 19A, paragraph 2 of the Competition Act. Yeah, in the following, I would like to highlight some aspects of the decision designating Google as a company with paramount significance across markets and some of the underlying theories of harm, as an example how we apply the law. The decision was taken actually by my decision division in December 2021. And we analyzed and stated that Google has significant activities on platform markets, and that this is why we looked at the other criteria concerning the question whether we can designate Google as a company with paramount significance across markets. And we found that yes, because Google is one of the largest digital companies in the world, which offers a wide range of internet services that shape the everyday internet use for consumers and companies. Google Search, one of the most well-known services, marks the beginning of Google's activities. However, Google was and is continuously expanding its offering. It now offers a broad portfolio of services, a number of which also have a wide reach. For example, Android, the operating system, Play Store, Google Maps, YouTube, and Chrome. Most of Google's services are available to private users free of charge, financed by advertising. And Google offers strong advertising services on all levels of the supply chain. The company's revenues from online advertising amount to billions of US dollars, which is approximately 80% of its total turnover. When applying the criteria which are named to find out whether a company has significant, paramount significance across markets, we paid attention to Google's high level of vertical integration and the fact that a large number of its services are somehow interconnected across markets. And by that, some of these services can, for example, secure and strengthen each other's market power. This is true, for example, for Android and the Android apps, which are offered via the Play Store on the mobile device of Google. It is often easier for such digital ecosystems to expand into a new service, not only because of the vertical integration or other interrelationships, but because within their ecosystem, they can themselves organize the markets, their entry conditions, and thus the competitive possibilities of third parties. Google also has access to a broad, very broad and deep database with special relevance for competition. Especially in the advertising sector, Google can rely on broad data sets collected of private users to deliver targeted advertising to them. And this can contribute to the good monetization, not only of its own advertising space, for example, on YouTube, but also the placement of advertising on third-party advertising spaces via Google's advertising services. However, also with respect to its services aimed at end users, Google can rely on its data sets collected about the use of its services to tailor these offerings precisely to end users. The dominant position on the market is one criteria of Section 19A to show particular market power. However, this is important. Section 19A does not require that we have to show dominance concerning any service. So by that, we are able to avoid the exact definitions of all potentially relevant markets, which often takes very long, which helps to accelerate then the proceeding. We can avoid this. However, with respect to Google, it was actually quite easy to show a dominant position on the German market for general search services, where Google holds more than 80% of the market shares. Also true for Google is that the company is in a position to set the rules for the potential users of its services, for example, via Google Search, YouTube, Android, Play Store, or its advertising services. And these services can be even described as infrastructure, since a large number of other services can, to a great extent, only be offered using Google services. And Google services are of great importance for the business of activities of third parties. Finally, Google has considerable resources like its financial means. And moreover, the data and other resources, such as the Google brand, can be used as shareable input across markets and reused any number of times to improve and expand existing services or develop new ones. Yet to sum up, according to our findings, Google holds an economic position of power which gives rise to a scope of action across markets that is not sufficiently controlled by competition. And this is why we designated Google. It took us less than a year to take the decision. However, when analyzing Google's market power, we could rely a lot on case law and market surveys by other competition authorities. So thank you to everybody here. Like, for example, the European Commission or the CMA, the ACCC. Google decided not to appeal the decision, so it is final and valid for 5 years. As what I already mentioned, it's only the first step. The Bundeskartellamt has initiated already several proceedings against Google, which may draw on this decision. So far, we closed the examination of Google's data processing terms with a commitment decision, and the Google News Showcase service case, because Google changed their behavior due to our proceeding, and we concluded it because of that. We have 2 other proceedings in the pipeline, which probably we'll be able to close very soon, concerning the Google Maps platform and the Google Automotive Services, which are mainly bundling cases. We have, of course, I already showed the slide with other proceedings against other digital companies. So thank you very much, and yeah.
Thank you, Katarina. It was a really insightful presentation. The structure and approach of Section 98 clearly represent a significant shift in the way competition authorities address potential anti-competitive practices of digital companies, particularly in tackling concerns proactively. The cases handled under this framework illustrate how these new regulatory tools are being applied in practice, shedding light on both of the challenges and the opportunities they bring. Also, the commitment decision regarding Google's data processing condition and its connection to the DMA brings up interesting questions about regulatory alignment and enforcement coordination at the European level. So I believe that the interaction between national competition laws and the broader EU regulatory framework will play an important role in shaping future enforcement efforts. I would like to open the path for some questions. So, firstly, addressing to Alexandre, I would like to be, it would be interesting to hear from you what the report and the subsidiary studies found about the potential benefits to the economy with this new approach you were proposing.
Well, thank you very much, Camila, for the question. Before tackling the subject that you have just brought, I think it's very interesting to see from Katarina's remarks, I think that one, this holistic approach towards the undertakings, activities, so this concertation of digital services provided by an undertaking designated as having a paramount significance across markets. And also, second of all, how those provisions are not self-executing, rather they have to be activated by the Bundeskartellamt. And you do have a shift in the burden of proof here, but you also need a justification to implement or to impose, to activate those provisions. I think what we want is very much in line, I think, that with this kind of procedure, because I think this gives us room, and now connecting with your question, to tackle the specific bottlenecks in a given ecosystem that relate to specific segments of the economy. And I think that what was brought to our attention through the public consultation, but also looking at other countries, at what's already been done, and with what's been brought to our attention also in the Ministry of Finance, is that through the implementation of such procedures, we can have an adequate or a faster answer and a complete answer to cases regarding, for instance,
digital advertising. We know that the media companies and digital journalisms, they rely strongly on revenues from digital advertising. So a greater degree of transparency, say, in the search results would be important for them. So that's an example of a transparency obligation. Second of all, greater transparency on the pricing structure and rules for allocation and payment of digital advertising. So this greater clarity and transparency on the ad tech value chain as a whole, this could promote a greater level of competition in the digital advertising value chain, reduce discrimination, and also promote a greater freedom of choice for advertisers, not only for those who would benefit from advertising, but also for advertisers. So there's a limitation on the current status of clarity. So for those who advertise, things can get a bit blurry sometimes. So I think that's one aspect. The second aspect relates to the financial system and to payments. And I think that's very important when we are talking both about the fees that are charged for in-app payments, but also for the physical infrastructure of mobile phones sometimes. So when we talk about NFC payments, when we talk about access to that, and also digital wallets, we see that there are some exclusionary practices here. And that duties to or obligations to interoperability, for instance, and access to data generated in mobile phones, that could be relevant also to open a few segments of those markets that are still closed, promote competition, and reduce the price for merchants and also for individual users. So we think that also could impact the payments industry, the credit industry, that has a growing, if on one hand it's growing its digital footprint. So we have very big digital nascence in the financial industry in Brazil. They're also reliant on cell phones and on the mobile operational systems, rules of operation to develop their business. And finally, I think that also relates to apps in general. Being able to provide your own means of payment and to have alternatives for downloading the apps, I think that's also an important use of those rules. And I think that last but not least, also in the case of marketplaces, and we see not only merchants but also restaurants, and I think that there's a great concern here when it comes to also to the transparency of pricing structures, of fees, and on the bundling and tying of products and services, and on limitations and on exclusivities that you have here, you know. So what we see is that the more proactive companies a target for the use of new rules, and a potential benefit for thousands of companies in the country, so across a very wide range of segments. And I think that could benefit the economy as a whole, the growth of the country and the productivity, because we're talking here about, we think it's about promoting competition, about promoting a better environment for doing business. And because of that, we also think that we can build a consensus across the political spectrum in that regard, because we're talking about real businesses, people's real lives, and how this impacts digital entrepreneurship in the country, how this impacts the funding of those companies and the possibilities here for startups to develop and thrive, and for app developers to come to Brazil and be sure that they have a path for growth, for a sustainable path for growth in the country.
Thank you so much. Catarina, now turning to you, it would be nice if you could elaborate more on the relationship between the Section 19A and the DMA, and provide perhaps provide a practical example to illustrate how these frameworks interact in addressing competition concerns?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. The DMA and the national approaches, like the German Section 19A of the German Competition Act, have much common ground. They have a similar motive, addressing challenges posed by platforms and ecosystems, allowing for more effective and timely intervention. Both strike a balance between legal certainty, flexibility, speed, and due process. But somehow, of course, the details differ. The DMA is deliberately designed as a focused instrument which addresses the tip of the iceberg, and this is why this allows the DMA to have a concept of self-enforcing regulation, which requires very specific obligations. The Section 19A as competition law instrument is more flexible, but requires tailor-made activation of prohibitions on a case-by-case basis. And it also allows for objective justification of a behavior. Under the DMA, there's a complete shift of the burden of proof. The gatekeepers need to demonstrate compliance. Under the Section 19A, there's only a partial shift as regards the potential objective justification of a behavior. On substance, the DMA obligations and the prohibition options under Section 19A overlap to a certain degree. In particular, some of the rule examples that are included in Section 19A are quite similar to the DMA provisions. But at least the more general principles or types of conducts that can be addressed by Section 19A are somewhat more open. And I think this matches with Article 1, paragraph 6b of the DMA, which spells out the relationship between competition law and the DMA, national competition law and the DMA, or competition law in general. The DMA covers already a lot, but it still allows national competition authorities to impose further obligations on gatekeepers, which makes a lot of sense in order to address the remaining competition issues. So you can think of services offered by gatekeeper companies that are no core platform services, or core platform services that do not qualify as important gateways under the DMA, or a combination of services and conduct not covered by the DMA's 22 obligations in Article 5 to 7 of the DMA. So there is a close relationship which makes coordination indispensable, and whenever we apply the Section 19A, we have to also think about the DMA and the delineation to it. This is why the DMA also includes particular rules on cooperation and coordination in Article 38, inspired by the EU Regulation 1/2003 to ensure coherent outcomes. And as an example for such coordination, I can give the Google data case, which we terminated with a commitment decision based on Section 19A. It was the first competition law decision against a gatekeeper after the DMA designation. The outcome of the proceeding is linked to its history. So, because the Google data proceeding was already initiated on the basis of Section 19A in May 2021. And at this point, it was not yet clear what the DMA obligations would actually look like. The focus of the proceeding concerning Google's state data terms, including its choice dialogues, that's the focus of the proceeding, and we investigated whether Google gives users sufficient choice regarding the cross-service processing of the data. The case aims at giving users better control over the data,
This does not only protect the users' rights, but also curbs Google's data-driven market power. The underlying theory of harm of the Google data case is inspired by our Facebook case, which was concluded in 2019. And therefore, at the outset, there was a far-reaching overlap with the obligation under the then introduced Article 5, Paragraph 2 DMA, which was developed from the same background. Our statement of objection in that case crossed with the entry into force of the DMA. And against this background, we had very intensive coordination and cooperation with the Commission throughout the proceeding. The outcome of the proceeding was that the Bundeskartellamt decision essentially extends Google's obligations under Article 5, Paragraph 2 of the DMA to further Google services, and thus makes Alphabet subject to further obligations. The cooperation with the Commission based on Article 38 of the DMA supported the alignment of Google's concessions in Germany with what Google has to do under the DMA. I think the result is a very good first example how the DMA and the national competition law rules are complementary. The DMA addresses cross-service data processing if designated core platform services are involved. However, the Bundeskartellamt, the competition concerns of the Bundeskartellamt went further. Even the data processing between non-designated services helps strengthening Google's ecosystem. Thus, the Bundeskartellamt's decision to declare Google's commitments binding extends Google's obligations under Article 5, Paragraph 2 of the DMA to more than, I think that number is even old, used to be more than 25, now I think even more other Google services that are not listed in Alphabet's DMA designation decision. For example, Gmail, Google News, Contacts, and Google TV. There's a dynamic mechanism. If a service is covered by the DMA, it falls outside the scope of our decision, and vice versa. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Katarina. Thank you all for being here today. So as we are close to reach the end of our discussion, I'd like just to take a few moments to reflect on some key points from today's panel and the insights we've shared. The Ministry of Finance 2024 Digital Platforms report outlines the profound transformation digital platforms bring to the economy. So a key reform proposed may grant CADE the power to designate systemically relevant platforms in digital markets and set individual roles for these platforms. Understanding where a digital market stands, whether it's contestable, dominated by key players, or part of a complex ecosystems, is essential for determining the type of regulatory intervention required. And this brings us to the importance of proactive regulation as being discussed in the application of Section 19A in Germany, and in reflecting on international experiences, it appears that proactive regulatory frameworks such as Section 19A of German Competition Act offer valuable insights. Observing how exempt regulation has been implemented in other jurisdictions and the application of this new legislation underscores the need for flexible, adaptable frameworks that can respond to the fast-changing nature of digital markets. Of course, while international experience like Germans provide useful lessons, it's important to carefully consider local context and specific market realities when designing regulatory interventions. So, in conclusion, the discussions today are crucial steps in developing effective regulatory frameworks, and we must continue to adapt our competition tools to these new realities. We still have 10 minutes, so I don't know if there is anyone that are willing to make some questions. No? Okay.
Good morning. I'm Andrea from Brazilian Authority, from CADE. My question is to Catarina. As you have this few years experience implementing the new regulation, I'd like you to ask you if you have faced the innovation argument as an element of the analysis of this ex-ante regulation. As we saw in some panels here, this might be a different approach from the traditional antitrust analysis. So that's my question for you. How have you dealt with the innovation argument?
Thank you. Well, I think since we have to activate our options under, obligation options, no, the obligations under the Section 19A, we can always also consider these innovation questions, whether innovation is affected or not. So, and we've done that also now. I mean, of course, the companies, the affected companies might raise issues like that, and we have looked at them when we are dealing with cases and examining. But so far, the innovation of the designated companies and their behavior is, of course, one aspect, but innovation by other companies is the other aspect. So we can look at that, I think, when we have activate our obligations.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. So once again, thank you very much to our distinguished speakers for your valuable contributions, and thank you all for your attention and active participation today. And I'm confident that these reflections will continue to inform and shape competition policy and regulatory strategies in this dynamic digital age that we live. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for your presentations. We now begin the closing session. I would like to invite Ms. Carolina Helena Fontes, General Coordinator at CADE, and one of the ICN Unilateral Conduct Working Group co-chairs to the floor, please.
Hello, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and esteemed colleagues, good morning. Over the past 3 days, driven by our shared commitment to promoting fair competition and tackling the complexities of unilateral conduct investigations, we have engaged in highly relevant and insightful debates. The event featured 5 plenary sessions, 7 breakout sessions, and the special session we just attended. A wide range of topics related to unilateral conduct were discussed, showcasing the richness and diversity of this amazing and widely relevant area of antitrust. Talking about the plenary sessions. In the first one, Navigate the Future of Digital Markets, Policymaking and Competition Law in AI-Driven Economy. we navigated through the future of digital markets from the perspective of 3 competition authorities, Portugal, Brazil, and Turkey. The panel addressed policymaking and competition law in AI-driven economy, focusing on the legal and practical challenges, as well as the incredible opportunities related to AI. We had an exciting conversation about generative AI, ongoing AI-supported projects, and the importance of keeping core principles of competition policy in mind. It was also highlighted that concentration may be one of the challenges we face in the coming years, which reinforce the importance of global cooperation. The second plenary session, the evolving challenge in unilateral conduct analysis, talked about the evolving challenges in unilateral conduct analysis from the perspective of 3 competition authorities, New Zealand, Portugal, and Australia. The agents were able to share their main challenges when it comes to investigate unilateral conducts and whether there have been recent changes in enforcement strategies. They also discussed the difficulties in defining relevant markets, particularly in digital and technology-driven markets. During the third plenary session, Remedies and Sanctions in Unilateral Conduct, we read a rich discussion from the perspective of 4 competition authorities, Spain, Germany, Japan, and Paraguay. They addressed the challenge that authorities usually face, especially when it comes to monitor remedies, and exchanged views on potential improvements in designing effective remedies and adopt proper sanctions. The importance of the ICN when it comes to sharing experience and keeping updated on the matter was also emphasized. The fourth plenary session, Unilateral Conduct by Public Bodies and Regulated Markets, explored the different set of challenges authorities face when regulated markets, focusing on unilateral conduct by public bodies from the perspective of 4 competition authorities, Zambia, Spain, South Africa, and Brazil. The agents had the opportunity to share reference cases that illustrate their experience with the topic. They also discussed unilateral conduct by statutory monopolies and the particular challenge that can arise when a previous controlled market becomes liberalized. Last but not least, our final plenary session, Unilateral Conduct and Price-Related Practice, Resale Price Maintenance, per se or rule of reason analysis, brought an overview of the recent evolution and current challenges regarding price-related practice. We focus on resale price maintenance from the perspective of 3 competition authorities, Spain, Australia, and New Zealand. The panelists explored the legal frameworks as well as the pro-competitive and anti-competitive effects of RPM. There was an interesting discussion on the different approaches used by the competition authorities, since some jurisdictions adopt the per se approach and while others adopt the rule of reason approach. So, I believe we had a valuable opportunity to explore the challenges and best practice in analyzing and enforcing unilateral conduct. I hope these discussions contribute to a deeper understanding of the complexities surrounding such investigations and foster great convergence in the application of antitrust laws. The diversity of issues discussed, the perspectives presented, and the strategies implemented across different jurisdictions highlight one antitrust's key characteristics. It opens to incorporate tools from various fields of knowledge while fostering collaboration and partnership among antitrust authorities. The exchange of experience and dissemination of knowledge is a pillar of the International Competition Network. It is also one of the reasons why CAD and the General Superintendents prioritize active participation in the various ICN working groups. The debates and exchange of experience provided by ICN are one of the elements that have enabled several recent advances in Brazilian competition policy. In the opening speech, I expressed my hope for this workshop to be a resounding success. In my sincere opinion, it was. And this is thanks to the commitment of each jurisdiction represented here. As I approach the conclusion, I would like to once again express my gratitude to our fellow working group co-chairs and my deepest thanks to all the colleagues from CAD who not only made this event possible, but also ensured its success. Team CAD, you are amazing. On behalf of the General Superintendent, Alexandre Barreto, I would like to thank everyone for their commitment and participation, and above all, for your generosity in sharing your knowledge and experience with the entire antitrust community. And may this spirit contribute to mobilize the Unilateral Conduct Working Group in our upcoming projects and workshops. And for our foreign friends, I strongly recommend having feijoada in Campirinha for lunch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Carolina. I'm pleased to give the floor to Mr. Gustavo Augusto Freitas de Lima for his closing remarks on behalf of CAGI and the ICN UCWG co-chairs.
Wow, 3 days just flew by, right? It seems that we just arrived here and now it's already time to say goodbye. It was an amazing event, 29 hours of discussion when we consider all the breakout sessions. Almost 100 people all over the world. People flew from Australia, New Zealand, Japan. Well, we know and we fully appreciate that it's very difficult to be here, and especially for our international guests. And it's so important that you be here, that you are here. So we really need to thank you all. And considering this is just a workshop, this is not a main event for ICN, these numbers are impressive. And when I started my presentation, I speak a little bit about cooperation. And this is the point of being here, because you can't cooperate, we do not cooperate with people that we do not trust. And that's a very truth of human nature. We can't trust people that we don't know. We don't fully cooperate with people that we don't trust. So sometimes it could seem overwhelming to receive all these informations for all these different panels and all this content. And you could think, well, maybe if I watch that online, maybe I could absorb it more. But it's so important that we are here. Because the time that's spent together in the coffee, in the lunch, going out and going to this event and discussing and knowing each other, well, as long as we humans continue to work, because maybe sometimes we are going to leave to the machines, but as long as it's done by humans, it's so important, because that's the only way we can truly, truly cooperate. And I have the prerogative of being the last to speak, and so hold on, because I fully intend to do it. For the last 4 years, we had something different regarding cooperation. Because cooperation and exchanging experiences, learning from each other. And sometimes you're going to hear something that makes total sense and maybe you're going to copy it. And sometimes you're going to hear something that you strongly disagree or you have some questions. you gradually smile, take that with a grain of salt, and absorb whatever you think it's appropriate. But for the last 4 years, I would say, or so, we at the antitrust community were told that we were doing everything wrong, that we got it wrong for the 40 years or so. We were not doing right, we are not doing enough, we should know more. And there was this list of very specific companies that we should target. We all should target that because they are the demon on earth. And if that was not what we were doing, we should hold everything on, focus on that, because this is what we should be doing. And look, cooperation is exchanging experiences, not telling other jurisdictions what to do. Telling other jurisdictions what to do is alignment. It is a very different thing. And now we are on the moment of time where this very strong leadership, this very vocal leadership, is gone. And apparently they are not even interested in showing up and discuss with us. And now the antitrust community look at each other and say, well, what we should be doing now? Should we go back and do the thing that people were saying that we were doing wrong from the start of the last 4 years? Should we just keep doing whatever we were told to do and hope for the best? Should we wait for the new orders? And there is a lesson to be learned here. Honestly, there's a lesson to be learned. It's quite good that we have this opportunity to learn it. And the lesson here is you need to build on a strong foundation, right? You can't build a house, you can't build a building on sand. Because if your foundation is not good, at some point of the construction, you will feel the pressure and everything you built will crumble to the ground. So if you are building something new, and we should always be building something new, that's good. That's good that antitrust gets an evolution and change and try to produce something newer. But we should make sure that we are building on rock-solid ground. Rock-solid science, rock-solid economics, rock-solid law. Because if that's not the case, we are going to see at some point in 10 years, and someone else is going to say we're doing everything wrong for the last 10 years, and so on, and so on, and so on. And we're always going to be waiting for someone to tell us what we're doing of unilateral conduct, actually focus on cartel very deeply for a quite reasonable time. And at some point, we received some critics on that. Well, why are you not doing unilateral cases? It led us to a self-reflection. Actually, we created a unit that is specialized on that. And now we're bringing very good cases. Some of the cases were actually mentioned here. Some of the cases were already settled, like we had 2 exclusive deals cases that were very successful, like Ambev, Gympass, iFood, that were all unilateral conducts. We have very good investigations regarding the means of payments, banking institutes, something in digital platforms. But when we did that soul search, well, other than opening a specialized unity, was coming back to the basics, like what we were doing that was right, what were the good experiences, and try to see how this could apply to new cases, to new industries, to new economy, but not trying to create new rules or creating a new way of judging things. You could take everything you have learned in the years, in our experience, and take to this case, and it seems to be very successful as far as I can tell. We have very good cases going forward. I'm not saying that this is, well, every jurisdiction in the world should focus on unilateral cases. It's not, even though this is the event, this is the workshop, but of course, every jurisdiction has its own priorities. But I believe CAD is saying a message for a few years at this point. Like, okay, well, we have a new industry, we have a new economy, we should have new cases, but look at the fundamentals. Economical efficiency, protection of the consumer, trying to decrease prices, increase quality, try to bring innovation. these are very good values no matter what. No matter what you're doing. If at the end of the day, the prices are down, you're more efficient, you have more innovation, your consumers feel right, your economy is growing, there's no way you could be doing something wrong. And look, no matter what we should consider what's good antitrust or no, the truth is we're living in the time of humankind that no other human lived before, because this is the time of the most economical growth. If you consider the last 100 years, no other living human being lived the time with more prosperity, more innovation, more growth, more welfare. There's not another time in human history like that, and this is the time where antitrust came forward. Could it be coincidental? Well, maybe. I would like to think not. And there is very good papers. There's a very good studies that demonstrate that antitrust has a very good participation on that, especially in innovation and economic growth. You can look at the countries that actually have very good antitrust agencies and look at the countries that do not have that, and you can actually correlate and demonstrate economic growth, innovation, and on and on and on. So maybe this is what we should be looking for. We are going to face a time of enormous changes. The economy is going to change everything. People are investing $500 billion in artificial intelligence. And if you think someone will consider to invest $500 billion and things are not going to be changed, well, money talks. If people are going to put money on that, you could bet economy will change. A lot of companies will fail. A lot of business will be shut down. Hopefully some business will emerge. And we are probably going to be the judges to that, because in every single jurisdiction, you will have winners, you will have losers, and people will go to antitrust to ask, well, now my business is being closed because these other companies entering, they have dominant power of the market, and you need to do something. And we will need to respond to that. We may like it or not, we will be the final judges of this fight. How are we going to judge that? And if I can leave one single message that you may bring home, is return to basics. Look at your fundamentals. Get your values right. Make sure your decisions are built on rock-solid theory. We all know we can be wrong sometimes. Hopefully we are more right than wrong. But at least if your values is right, even when you're wrong, people will understand. Say, well, all right, at least we know what we are doing. This is their priority. Do not go with the wind, because the wind will always be changing. We will always be changing. And when the wind stops blowing, you do not know where to go. So that's my final message. I'm so happy that you were here. Now we are going to have lunch. Hope you have some feijoadas and caipirinhas. I'm not sure if you actually have that, but if you not, you can always buy some places in Brazil. Always have a feijoada and caipirinha on Fridays. We are going to have the travel to Christ the Redeemer and Sugarloaf. If you chose one and you are worried you chose the right one, don't worry, because from one you can see the other. So, so at least all your photographs, you're going to show both. So don't get worried about that. And thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed the event. And we are always with our arms open to receive you again. It was a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gustavo. We'd like to express our gratitude to all participants of this 11th ICN Unilateral Conduct Workshop, both in person and online. We are truly grateful for your presence and wish you a pleasant afternoon and a smooth flight back home. See you at the next ICN Unilateral Conduct Workshop. Thank you very much. Have a nice tour. Have a nice weekend. Thank you.